They mocked Earth as a forgotten backwater, until entire alien fleets vanished without a trace. No warnings. No survivors. No explanations. If you want more stories where silence becomes the deadliest weapon, subscribe now. They laughed when Earth joined the Galactic Concord. Not with malice, but with the kind of dismissive humor that comes from a species so advanced they believed they had nothing left to fear. The Gorlak called us dirtwalkers. The Vizari joked that we still used combustion engines. Every ambassadorial meeting, every diplomatic summit, every policy discussion, we were tolerated, not respected. Our technology was centuries behind, our influence non-existent. When Earth requested observer status on the Concord's High Council, half the chamber didn't even hide their smirks. One Kalari representative, swollen with pride and centuries of inherited superiority, said, "Let them observe. Even children must see the stars before they realize their place beneath them." And yet we watched. Quietly. Patiently. Back on Earth, the narrative was different. While the media highlighted peace and progress, and our leaders spoke of unity, behind closed doors, the humiliation cut deep. Every insult was recorded. Every condescending smirk noted. The world's governments, for the first time in living memory, agreed on something. They didn't want revenge. Not at first. What they wanted was recognition. What they got, however, was something far colder. Determination. A shadow agency, nameless, unmarked, was born beneath layers of misdirection and black budgets. On paper, it didn't exist. In orbit, it couldn't be tracked. And at its helm was a man who understood what the galaxy did not, Admiral Kenji Sato. He rarely spoke at public meetings. When he did, his words were surgical. Precise. He never raised his voice. But those who worked with him described him with one word: inevitable. He didn't want to win medals. He didn't want to be remembered. He wanted to ensure no one ever mocked humanity again. The Gorlak Empire, ever proud of its sensor technology, was the first to detect something odd. A long-range probe had recorded a strange energy fluctuation near the Brexon Corridor, deep space where trade convoys often passed through. They sent a small patrol, 5 ships, minimal crew, standard recon mission. They never returned. No distress signal. No explosion. Nothing. It was written off as pilot error or spatial anomalies. That was the official report. Then, 2 weeks later, an entire exploration fleet, over 1,000 ships, disappeared while conducting a routine mapping operation in a neighboring sector. This time, panic didn't just whisper, it screamed. Emergency meetings were called. Dozens of species flooded the Concord's crisis channel, each demanding answers. Theories ranged from a rogue AI uprising to an uncharted black hole. Some even suggested a reborn precursor species had returned. Humanity offered their condolences during these gatherings, appearing concerned but uninformed. "Let us know if we can be of assistance," our ambassador had said, keeping her tone respectfully neutral. "We may not have your advanced sensors, but perhaps we can help in other ways." No one took her seriously. But in the depths of the Pacific Trench, inside a structure so secret its builders never lived to speak of it, Sato stood before a silent operations team. No applause. No chatter. Only data flowing across walls of quantum glass, each line confirming what they already knew. Phantom Rain had worked. The human stealth fleet, born from decades of underground development, had succeeded. These weren't just cloaked ships, they were technological ghosts. Wrapped in adaptive metamaterials, soundless in void, invisible to radar, heat, light, or even psychic detection. They didn't disrupt enemy systems. They became part of the environment. A silent current in deep space. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't announce themselves. Instead, they slid between enemy hulls, attached quantum tethers, and induced synchronized system failures. No destruction. No blood. Just darkness. "Target status?" Sato asked. "Confirmed acquisition, sir," replied the technician. "Full fleet integrity. No casualties." Retrieval complete. Good, he said. Reset protocols. Deploy to secondary targets. Begin Phase 2. The orders were cold. Measured. But behind those words lay a truth the galaxy had yet to comprehend. Humanity hadn't just caught up. We had surpassed them in the one domain they never thought to master: silence. In a universe of species obsessed with dominance, expansion, and flashy displays of force, humans had gone inward. We'd studied how predators move, how shadows kill more effectively than bullets. Our strength wasn't numbers or firepower. It was misdirection. Patience. Psychological warfare. The Gorlak began to panic, but their pride prevented them from showing it. A second recon fleet was prepped, larger, with advanced shielding and escort fighters. When they failed to report back, the tone of galactic communication shifted. Now there was urgency. Now there were whispers of fear. Still, no one mentioned Earth. It was impossible. Illogical. The humans? The ones with obsolete tech, primitive engines, and laughable stealth? No. Couldn't be. They'd barely passed the trials to enter Concord space. But Sato had never cared about what they believed. Let them believe, he once told his team. The moment they suspect, the moment they adjust. Our power lies not in victory, but in their inability to acknowledge it. He was right. Across the Concord's intelligence networks, panic began to spread. More fleets were reassigned. Trade routes diverted. Surveillance programs doubled. Internal accusations flared, species blaming each other for sabotage or betrayal. All while Earth remained polite. No demands. No threats. Just presence. During the next emergency summit, the human ambassador leaned forward, eyes calm. Perhaps, she said slowly, you've misjudged the value of silence. No one laughed this time. Because in the quiet corners of the galaxy, powerful ships once feared for their invincibility had simply stopped responding. No battles. No transmissions. Only absence. And somewhere, deep in the black, the phantom rain watched. Waiting. They still didn't know it was us. But they would. The official report said a minor Gorlak patrol had suffered navigational failure and drifted into a gravity well. 5 ships lost, no survivors. No one questioned it. Minor losses weren't unusual in deep space, and the Brexon corridor had its share of hazards. But when a 1,000-ship expeditionary fleet, fully equipped, monitored, and armed, vanished en route to the Carix cluster, no one could hide behind routine explanations. The disappearance stunned the Galactic Concord. There were no distress calls. No wreckage. No radiation spikes. No evidence of weapons discharge. Just absence. Every sensor feed went dark in perfect sync, as if a curtain had fallen across the fleet in an instant. Entire command chains blinked out of existence. Every civilization with ships in that mission demanded answers. None came. Theories exploded across the Concord. Rogue AIs rising again from forgotten databanks. A gravitational anomaly too fast to measure. A precursor weapon activating after millennia. Rumors of ancient threats spread faster than facts. Empires turned inward, afraid to send reinforcements without guarantees. Panic sparked, and with it suspicion. The Kalari accused the Varnax of sabotage. The Varnax blamed the Gorlak for leading the fleet into a trap. Diplomatic channels overflowed with denial and finger-pointing. Minor skirmishes flared on borders that had been quiet for decades. Trust shattered. Humanity watched. We issued a short statement. We extend our condolences to the fallen. Earth stands ready to assist in any investigation deemed appropriate by the Concord Council. No one accepted the offer. Why would they? Earth was still seen as a junior member, barely qualified to operate beyond its own system. What could we possibly offer in a crisis that had baffled the galaxy's oldest powers? But someone had noticed. During a closed-door council session, an aged Gorlak admiral leaned forward and asked a question no one else dared to consider. What are the humans doing during all this? The room fell silent. Data was requested. Surveillance logs pulled. Dozens of ships were tasked with monitoring Terran space, watching for signs of suspicious movement. But nothing appeared unusual. Earth's traffic was normal. Our only fleet, the public one, hadn't left orbit in weeks. Communications clean. Civilian activity unaltered. But that was the brilliance of it. Phantom Rain didn't exist on paper. Its ships were never registered. They operated from deep void stations constructed in silence, far beyond the reach of standard probes. They didn't transmit. They didn't receive. They moved only when ordered through compressed quantum relays so narrow they fell below measurable thresholds. And they moved in shadows. Within Earth's inner councils, Sato gave no celebratory orders. No acknowledgement of victory. The operation was clinical. The stolen data from the vanished fleet was already under analysis. Alien tech, crew patterns, command protocols, all dissected. Humanity didn't need prisoners. We needed patterns. Weaknesses. Predictability. Every culture believed in escalation. In firepower. In overwhelming response. But Earth had learned differently. From nature. From history. From our own extinction-level fears. We didn't need to match their fleets. We only needed to erase them before they reacted. And now, we had done it twice. A third disappearance followed within days. This time, a scout wing from the Kalari Confederation. Their ships were designed for stealth and recon, some of the most advanced in the galaxy. But they didn't even make it to their first checkpoint. Their final signal was a normal check-in. No warning. No fear. Then, nothing. Now fear bloomed like wildfire. Council meetings devolved into chaos. Emergency protocols enacted across 3 sectors. Borders locked. Civilian transport restricted. Independent freighter captains began refusing jobs near affected regions. Black markets spread rumors of ghosts in the void, predators that didn't show up on scans, didn't make noise, didn't negotiate. And still, Earth said nothing. At the 3rd emergency summit, the Concord chair finally asked the question directly. Ambassador Tanaka, has Earth deployed any covert assets in contested sectors? She didn't flinch. Earth's defense forces are operating solely within sovereign boundaries, she replied. We've dispatched no official fleets beyond our assigned zones. If the Council suspects otherwise, we're open to a neutral investigation. No one dared call her bluff. Because no one had proof. And proof, in the political world, mattered more than fear. But the message had already sunk in. Humanity wasn't laughing. We weren't boasting. We weren't even responding to accusations. We were simply present. A quiet shift rippled through the Concord's intelligence circles. Surveillance on Earth doubled. Analysts reviewed decades of data. Old signals once considered noise were re-examined. Reports of vanished probes, strange sensor echoes, and unexplained energy dips were pulled from archives and reclassified. The pieces didn't fit. There was no clear pattern. No ship signatures. No identifiable tech. But the timing, the locations, the silence, it all felt coordinated. The term, stealth fleet, began circulating in hushed conversations. Not just stealth in cloaking or speed, but something deeper. Stealth in concept. In existence. The idea that an entire armada could move, strike, and vanish without leaving a single trace. They began to whisper one name. Phantom Rain. They didn't know it was real. But the idea was enough. Admiral Sato read the reports without expression. His analysts forwarded intercepted communications from Concord chatter. Species that once mocked Earth were now deploying shield arrays, scrambling recon swarms, boosting AI detection nets in all sectors surrounding their territories. He approved no comment. Instead, he gave a simple order. Next target. Begin Phase 3. The goal was never open war. War meant diplomacy, declarations, treaties. Earth didn't want conflict. We wanted a seat at the table, earned not through begging, but through consequence. The next disappearance wasn't military. It was a corporate fleet, private vessels belonging to a powerful Vazari trade syndicate. Hundreds of ships, each carrying experimental tech, went missing en route to a secure research station. No wreckage. No ransom. Just absence. The Vizari, enraged, accused every rival empire of industrial sabotage. None of them were guilty. The Council entered its most unstable period in centuries. Alliances frayed. Treaties suspended. Joint operations collapsed under mutual distrust. And Earth? Earth remained the quiet guest in the corner of the room. Polite. Professional. Unassuming. But now, no one laughed. Not out loud. Because in the empty corridors of lost fleets, in the echo of unanswered calls, in the silence between sensor pings, something was moving. And they couldn't stop it. They didn't even know where to look. For most of the galaxy, war meant spectacle. The Kalari built ships larger than cities, ornamented with glowing fins and energy cores visible from orbit. The Varnax believed in overwhelming force, deploying drone swarms so vast they could black out stars. Even the Gorlak, known for efficiency, considered warfare a form of performance, a statement of pride. But humanity had never followed that model. We didn't build monuments to show our strength. We built secrets. And in those secrets, we built silence. Project Phantom Rain began 26 years before Earth was officially granted full Concord status. At the time, we were still negotiating border terms and mineral rights, still translating ancient galactic protocols into legal documents. But in the underground vaults of Geneva, in the quantum labs of New Santiago, and in the pressure domes beneath Mare Imbrium, humanity had already shifted focus. The humiliation, the disregard, the patronizing smirks from alien diplomats, they hadn't angered us. They had clarified our goal. We would never match the galaxy in size, numbers, or raw firepower. But no one in the Concord had mastered true invisibility. Every stealth technology they boasted about still produced trace emissions, still left thermal trails, still bent spacetime just enough to trigger high-grade sensors. Humans looked at that and asked a different question. What if the best stealth wasn't technological camouflage, but engineered irrelevance? Our scientists studied more than space warfare. They studied the deep ocean. Arctic predators. Cephalopods that became indistinguishable from stone. Owls that made no sound in flight. Creatures whose very survival relied not on combat, but on the inability of others to perceive them. The early prototypes were failures. Ships imploded under dampened grav fields. AI navigation cores destabilized when deprived of feedback. Pilots experienced hallucinations due to psychic null zones. But failure was data, and data became refinement. Then came the breakthrough, a ship hull grown, not built. Organic mechanical alloy capable of absorbing and dispersing radiation, vibration, and even psychic energy. Externally, it resembled a deep space rock, shapeless, matte, unnoticeable. Internally, it was a symphony of precision. No lights. No sound. Pilots trained to operate in total silence, guided by AI co-pilots that used pulse-based navigation maps invisible to standard sensors. The first successful vessel was codenamed Whisper 1. It passed directly through 3 alien detection grids without a single ping. Its crew landed, extracted a data core from a decommissioned Vizari satellite, and returned without detection. Earth's intelligence community declared the mission a turning point. Admiral Sato, then a rear admiral in charge of covert development, was promoted to full command. From there, the fleet expanded, slowly, deliberately, without broadcasting a single construction update. No shipyards. No fuel convoys. Everything grown, assembled, and launched from hidden sites, deep trenches, hollowed asteroids, isolated polar bases. Each ship was logged only in physical notebooks, stored in sealed vaults far from the digital net. The entire project existed without a single network connection. Nothing could be traced because nothing was visible. To command these ships, Earth didn't recruit ordinary officers. Pilots were chosen from the shadows, former Black Ops, extreme survivalists, AI integration volunteers. Men and women willing to disappear without credit, recognition, or return. Their reward wasn't fame, it was purpose. Sato's doctrine was clear, asterisk. We don't seek war. We seek advantage. If they never know we were there, we've already won. Asterisk. The Concorde had no clue such a fleet existed. Earth's public ships remained antiquated by design. Broadcasts were deliberately clumsy. Our defense grid slow to respond in drills. All part of the mask. Let the galaxy see what it wanted to see, a well-meaning, backward planet trying to catch up. Meanwhile, the real fleet operated in the void between voids. Phantom Rain wasn't designed to destroy cities or engage in dogfights. Its purpose was erasure. Selective removal of threats. Capture of intelligence assets. Disruption of enemy infrastructure without leaving evidence. Each mission began with observation. Ghost drones, nanoscale scouts, drifted silently into alien systems, attaching to ships, satellites, and relay stations. They didn't hack or broadcast. They absorbed. Learning ship behavior, patrol routes, AI cycles, and blind spots. Then came the insertion. A Phantom Rain vessel would slide in, using gravitational drift rather than propulsion. It would position itself within meters of its target, lock on, and deploy infiltration tethers. These weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They were data parasites. They mapped every function of the enemy ship and activated dormant feedback loops that neutralized power cores and comm systems simultaneously. In under 90 seconds, a ship went from fully operational to silent husk. The crews were retrieved only if deemed valuable. Otherwise, they were left in induced stasis, their vessels redirected to empty sectors, far from trade routes. To the outside world, they simply vanished. The brilliance of Phantom Rain wasn't in its technology, but in its doctrine. No unnecessary actions. No stray missions. No debris. Each disappearance a surgical cut in the fabric of galactic certainty. By the time the third alien fleet had gone missing, Earth had already mapped out the next 6. Not to destroy them, but to test reactions. Psychological warfare on a scale the galaxy had never considered. Alien civilizations weren't prepared for the unknown. Their military doctrines were linear: detect, engage, overpower. They had no protocol for a war they couldn't see, against an enemy that never claimed responsibility. And that was the point. Humanity's greatest weapon was never its ships or AI systems. It was ambiguity. In a galaxy ruled by assumptions and arrogance, we'd weaponize doubt. Sato had once explained it to his inner circle with chilling clarity. If they fear us, they'll unite. If they know it's us, they'll retaliate. But if they're unsure, if they suspect but can't confirm, they'll turn on each other. Let them collapse under the weight of their own uncertainty. And they were. The Concorde was already fragmenting. Old rivalries reignited. Accusations flew across encrypted channels. Armadas recalled to home sectors. Trade agreements frozen. Earth hadn't fired a single public shot, and yet the galactic balance was shifting. Back home, the Phantom Rain fleet remained on standby. New ships were quietly added to the rotation. AI systems updated. Psychological profiles of alien leadership adjusted weekly. Every disappearance was followed by a detailed analysis of enemy response, military, diplomatic, and emotional. We didn't need applause. We didn't need validation. They would never see us coming. And by the time they realized what we were capable of, they would already be too afraid to speak our name. The Kalari had never tasted defeat. Their fleets were efficient, modular, and ruthlessly optimized for control. When the first wave of disappearances shook the Concorde, they responded not with fear, but with strategy. A calculated, high-value fleet was assembled: fast carriers, pulse frigates, recon shadows, each ship built for electronic warfare and counter-stealth detection. They weren't sent to attack. They were sent to trap whoever, or whatever, was behind the vanishing axe. The fleet's departure was broadcast deliberately. This was bait. The Concorde watched closely, expecting contact, expecting retaliation, expecting something. And then, as with the others, nothing returned. The fleet vanished just after entering the peripheral stretch of the Harnack Fold, a zone with no history of anomalies, warfare, or danger. It simply ceased transmission. No last message. No signs of combat. Only silence. This time, panic didn't just ripple, it detonated. The Kalari Confederation declared a state of emergency. Civilian traffic was grounded. Internal planetary borders locked down. The fleet's disappearance had cost them their second most powerful naval arm, over 40,000 personnel, and billions in classified hardware. And yet the loss of life wasn't what disturbed them. It was the method. The clean erasure. The invisible hand. Not one ship destroyed. Not one warning fired. It was the kind of death only nightmares understood. The Kalari weren't alone. The Gorlak Empire initiated full-spectrum scans of every transit corridor within a 10-light-year radius of the last known coordinates. Their sensor networks, considered among the most advanced in the Concord, detected no radiation anomalies, no gravitational distortions, no quantum wake fields. Nothing. Their ships simply ceased to exist. Earth, as always, issued a short condolence message through diplomatic channels. Our ambassador expressed concern and a willingness to help de-escalate tensions. The offer was ignored again. But behind Earth's silence, data was flowing. The Phantom Rain operation had advanced beyond suppression. It was now in full observational exploitation. Each targeted fleet had been mapped, isolated, and disabled according to its own weaknesses. The Kalari ships were built on synchronized AI frameworks, beautifully fast, dangerously predictable. Disruption nodes were deployed in sequence, interrupting the AI link chain and leaving command systems helpless within milliseconds. No alarms. No fight. Just void. Humanity's black labs had already reverse-engineered key Kalari systems. Lessons were logged, vulnerabilities indexed. Earth didn't need to match alien technology anymore. We simply harvested it. The Concord now stood on the edge of chaos. Rumors spread that the disappearances were the work of an extra-dimensional force, or a sentient quantum field reacting to fleet density. Religious factions declared it divine punishment. Some worlds broke into riots. Others sealed themselves behind defense bubbles. Still, no one had a name to blame. But fear isn't patient. It festers. It leaps ahead of logic. The Vazari began retrofitting their war cruisers with new energy pulse bursts meant to sweep for hidden ships. The Varnax deployed mines across neutral corridors to detect gravitational interference. The Gorlak launched dozens of long-range drones, which quietly vanished one by one. Their absence was noted, not explained. Through it all, Earth remained steady. No shift in public fleet positions. No technological displays. No increase in communications. The image of innocence. Yet deep beneath the polar caps, in Blackwater vaults sealed against time itself, Admiral Sato reviewed the simulations for the next 3 waves. Every alien military protocol depended on detection response loops. Their entire war doctrines assumed some kind of signal, a flare, a trace, a hint of mass or energy to confirm an enemy's position. Phantom Rain eliminated the loop. It severed the idea that war had to be seen. The success wasn't just technological. It was psychological. Alien command chains fractured. Officers began hesitating. Patrol formations widened. Internal dissent rose among logistics planners, angry that they were asked to guard sectors with no confirmed enemy. Military AI cores, trained on thousands of years of engagement data, began to report confidence thresholds below acceptable margins. Entire empires were becoming paralyzed not by an attack, but by the potential for one. And Earth was just getting started. The next phase introduced active manipulation. Select targets weren't removed, they were altered. A Varnax destroyer was allowed to escape, carrying a hacked core that subtly changed sensor values. The crew would unknowingly feed disinformation to their superiors, leading enemy fleets into empty sectors while Phantom Rain harvested new data from their blind spots. A Kalari forward base received a broken transmission containing a half-decrypted message in a distorted human voice. They analyzed it for weeks, unable to confirm its authenticity. It was meaningless by design. The more they searched for Earth's hand, the more they questioned their own tools. The Phantom became a mirror, reflecting their fears back at them until they started attacking shadows. That was Sato's goal. The public never saw him. His name wasn't listed in official Earth records. But across Phantom Rain command nodes, his doctrine shaped everything. Asterisk. They don't need to know who we are. They just need to doubt who they are. Asterisk. Earth's real fleet didn't broadcast power. It didn't demand territory. It didn't announce its victories. Its purpose was to ensure that by the time anyone considered acting against Earth, their own systems would betray them. By the fourth disappearance, alien war planners had begun circulating risk advisories mentioning Terran irregular asymmetry as a theoretical threat. The term wasn't official. It had no definition. But it spread. In briefings. In intelligence notes. In passing remarks between captains and tacticians. The fear had been seeded. Now it grew on its own. Every signal delay became suspicious. Every system glitch a potential breach. Alien fleets started deploying with redundant AI systems, overlapping radar layers, and triple verification protocols. The paranoia slowed them down, weakened their formations, and turned military readiness into a bureaucratic mess. Meanwhile, Phantom Rain accelerated. Missions expanded. Target variety increased. Civilian data hubs. Relay satellites. Automated supply vessels. No destruction. No announcements. Just controlled removal, always with minimal trace. Because the power wasn't in the act, it was in the pattern. The galaxy had built its hierarchy on visibility, on declarations, on the raw theater of force. Humanity had simply declined to play that game. And now, those who once mocked Earth couldn't even track us, because we were already inside their systems, inside their psychology, and inside their fear. They still didn't know how. Or why. But they were starting to realize who. The Concord High Council met under emergency protocol for the first time in 2 centuries. Attendance was mandatory. Dozens of species filled the chamber, some still reeling from recent fleet disappearances, others hiding their fear behind polished arrogance. A motion was brought forward, the possibility that an unknown external entity was targeting major powers. No one said Earth out loud, not yet. But the implication lingered in every cautious pause and redirected accusation. Delegates argued over everything: sensor anomalies, missing ship logs, erratic AI patterns, even the possibility of sabotage from internal factions. Some demanded immediate retaliation against suspected rivals. Others urged patience. But none had proof. And in that void of evidence, trust died. The Gorlak ambassador proposed a galactic surveillance net, a coordinated web of sensors and AI watchtowers linking every member species. The idea sounded reasonable, until the Vizari rejected it, claiming it would expose their strategic sectors. The Kilari accused them of hiding assets. The Varnaks accused both of stalling while preparing attacks. Within hours, negotiations collapsed. The council adjourned without a single resolution. Behind the scenes, fleets were mobilized quietly. Not to strike, but to defend from shadows, from ghosts, from silence itself. Earth requested no changes to its diplomatic standing. No security exemptions. No technology transfers. We filed no complaints, submitted no censor logs. The human ambassador made one statement: "If we are all under threat, then let us find unity before we find blame." It was received politely. No one responded. But cracks had already formed. The Gorlak's central military database recorded 118 failed sensor sweeps across sectors near Terran space. Vizari communication arrays reported phantom pulses too brief to trace. Kilari AI systems flagged patterns they couldn't classify, and worse, couldn't reproduce. Every attempt to identify the source yielded nothing. Not even a trace of interference. Just data gaps. Each incident alone meant nothing. Together, they formed a map. And that map pointed toward Earth. Still, no one acted. Because Earth hadn't made any demands. Hadn't claimed responsibility. Hadn't shown its hand. That made it worse. Empires that thrived on control now found themselves powerless. They had weapons without targets, fleets without direction. Their officers briefed crews using theories and assumptions, never truths. Protocols were updated daily. Unseen enemies were listed in combat drills under blank entries. Meanwhile, Earth expanded the Phantom Rain operation into second-phase testing. Not just disabling fleets, but manipulating behavior. Key Concord systems were infiltrated, not to extract information, but to implant false leads. Navigation beacons were redirected. Probe telemetry adjusted. The result: enemy ships patrolling empty zones, chasing sensor echoes generated by their own redirected scanners. It was psychological attrition. Not a war of attrition, but of attention. The cost was devastating. Alien logistics chains fractured under redundant safety procedures. Resource transports delayed. Military spending surged across all major empires, bleeding their economies. Civilian unrest followed. Some colonies began questioning the Council's authority. Others turned isolationist, declaring their sectors closed. And Earth still hadn't done anything publicly. The Varnax tried to deploy an independent investigative fleet into Terran-adjacent space, masked as an exploration mission. The entire fleet turned around after entering Sector Theta 9. No contact. No confrontation. They simply received a signal. It was one word: leave. The ships obeyed. That was the first time an alien fleet had been directly warned, and it terrified them more than an attack would have. Because it confirmed something they hadn't wanted to believe. Earth wasn't just a suspect. It was watching. The Council reconvened under tighter security. Several members called for sanctions against Earth. The motion failed. Others demanded Earth be formally questioned under Concord Code Omega. That failed too. No one wanted to provoke us. Not because of confirmed guilt, but because of what might happen if we were. We had become Schrödinger's superpower. Both innocent and guilty. Both primitive and untouchable. In response, Earth's ambassador issued a 3-sentence statement. Humanity remains committed to peace. We urge restraint. Be careful where you look for ghosts. You might find something worse. The room fell into silence. From that moment, Earth was no longer dismissed. Not out of respect, but out of fear. No empire wanted to be the one to push us too far. Because if we truly had erased those fleets, and everyone now assumed we had, what else were we capable of? Alien military analysts revised threat indexes. Earth went from level 4 observation status to level 1 anomalous threat within 3 weeks. Our official navy hadn't moved. Our orbital platforms hadn't changed. Our broadcasts remained cheerful and slow. But every high-ranking officer in the Concord now carried contingency plans labeled Terran Scenario. They didn't know our fleet count, or capabilities, or doctrines. They only knew one thing: no one had ever come back. For all their posturing, they never truly fought an enemy that didn't seek victory through combat. They didn't understand how to fight someone who didn't want territory or glory. Earth didn't want a throne. We wanted silence. Control of perception. Influence without presence. That made us invincible. Because they didn't know when we'd act. Or if. Or whether we already had. They now checked their systems twice. Triple verified orders. They no longer trusted what they saw. Every scan was suspect. Every report potentially false. Every crew member a possible breach. That was the real campaign. Not destruction. Doubt. The more they tried to find us, the more they lost themselves. And Earth never lifted a finger in public. By the time they realized what they were up against, we'd already rewritten the rules of power. Not through war. Through absence. Through silence. And they knew, if we ever chose to speak, it would be too late to respond. The Vazari Empire was the first to break containment. Their analysts had long warned that the stalemate could not hold, and when their own outer patrol vanished with no distress call, they crossed the line. A stealth probe, cloaked in tri-phase resonance shielding, guided by predictive AI, was launched directly toward Earth's orbital perimeter. It never arrived. The signal vanished mid-route, not in Terran space, but far earlier, in the void. No impact, no trace. Just silence. That should have ended the incursion, but the Vazari misinterpreted the outcome. They believed the probe had reached Earth and been intercepted by human defenses. That meant Earth had noticed. That meant they had limited stealth detection range. So they sent another. Then 5. Then 20. Every one disappeared. Still, the Vazari continued, convinced they were getting closer. What they didn't realize was that Earth had seen the first probe before it even launched. We weren't reacting. We were allowing them to think they were making progress. Our real target wasn't the probes. It was the pattern of thought behind them. While the Vazari scrambled to analyze their missing assets, they failed to notice what was happening at home. Financial algorithms began showing unpredictable instability. Naval orders rerouted themselves. Internal sensors started flagging false movement reports. It began subtly, just enough to create friction, nothing more. But over time, it added up. Delays mounted. Trust eroded. By the time the Vazari High Command realized they were under digital siege, their core systems had entered a constant loop of reboot and recalibration. Their firewalls had never been breached. Nothing external had accessed their systems. But their own predictive algorithms, trained on human behavior simulations, had begun anticipating attacks that never came. They self-sabotaged. And Earth didn't need to touch a single file. In Concord space, other empires watched with growing dread. The Gorlak remained quiet, but doubled their cyber intelligence budgets. The Kalari recalled their outposts along the galactic rim. The Varnaks quietly suspended joint patrols and invoked silent readiness protocols across their fleets. No declarations were made. But every power now operated under the assumption that Earth was in control, even if they couldn't prove it. For humanity, that was the goal. Our stealth fleet wasn't a weapon, it was a message. One they couldn't intercept, decrypt, or stop. Its mere existence reshaped how galactic powers functioned. Where once they would mobilize over border disputes, now they hesitated. Every movement was re-evaluated under the shadow of the unknown. Was it safe? Would it provoke a response? Was it worth the risk? We had created a new kind of deterrence. Not one based on overwhelming force, but on uncertain consequence. A fear of invisible lines, undefined thresholds. One where no one knew what might trigger the ghost fleet to reappear. At the heart of it all was Earth's silence. Not once had humanity admitted involvement. Not once had we confirmed the capability. Every event, from the missing fleets to the system disruptions, remained officially unsolved. That silence did more than declarations ever could. It left everyone guessing, and guessing meant hesitation. And hesitation, in war, was a form of defeat. But there was another layer. One even more subtle. As Concord species diverted attention to Earth, they began to ignore each other. Minor rivalries festered beneath the surface. Old grudges returned. Alliances weakened. Even basic interstellar trade was strained. Earth had disrupted not just fleets or systems, but the entire geopolitical equilibrium. And still we said nothing. The tipping point came when the Gorlak discovered one of their long-range monitoring satellites had been repositioned. Not destroyed. Not hijacked. Simply moved a fraction of a degree, just enough to blind its view of a Terran sector. No trace of external manipulation. No software breach. The satellite's logs showed a routine calibration. But the Gorlak had not ordered it. That terrified them more than a direct attack would have. Because it meant someone understood their systems better than they did. Knew how to make changes that wouldn't be flagged. Someone who could edit reality without leaving fingerprints. They issued no formal complaint. No inquiry. Instead, the Gorlak quietly dismantled their surveillance grid. They shut down their observation network entirely, hoping that silence might protect them, too. By now, Earth's influence had spread without moving an inch. Galactic routes were being redrawn to avoid Terran-adjacent sectors. Military drills no longer included hypothetical human engagement. They were replaced by anomalous interference scenarios. Entire naval academies began rewriting doctrine around counter-uncertainty. The term, Terran variable, entered military lexicons. The Council attempted one final act of unity, a proposed verification accord, where member empires would submit system integrity data for cross-examination. Earth declined participation. But not with hostility. Just a polite refusal, citing internal security policies. The message was clear: we were not bound by their systems anymore. And no one dared challenge us on it. What followed wasn't an announcement. It was a shift in posture. Alien powers began to treat Earth not as a rogue world or an upstart civilization, but as a wild card. Dangerous, unknowable, too risky to provoke. Not because of what we did, but because of what they believed we could do. The stealth fleet had succeeded without ever revealing itself fully. In fact, that was its power. Every time it wasn't seen, its legend grew. Every time it was blamed without confirmation, it gained credibility. It became the phantom at the edge of every sensor ping, the whisper behind every unexplained glitch. In truth, most of the disappearances and disruptions were conducted by only a handful of vessels. The rest remained dormant. Unused. Their purpose wasn't action. It was suggestion. And in a galaxy ruled by fear and pride, that suggestion was more effective than 1,000 dreadnoughts. The aliens had once called Earth a backwater. Primitive. Insignificant. They laughed at our late arrival, our strange biology, our obsession with redundancy and misdirection. Now, they looked over their shoulders. Rechecked every transmission. Delayed every order until a second confirmation arrived. And we just watched. Quiet. Calculating. Ready. The message had been delivered. Not with words. Not even with weapons. But with absence. And in that silence, we became the most powerful force in the galaxy. The turning point wasn't loud. There were no declarations of war, no fleets engaging in glorious battle. It was a whisper. A faint background rumor that spread like mold, slow, silent, and suffocating. Entire sectors of space began reporting anomalies, sensor blackouts, ships going off course for seconds before auto-correcting, databanks returning scrambled historical records. No evidence of tampering, no traceable intrusion. Just a growing sense that something was wrong, subtle, precise, and engineered. The Kalari Empire was the first to collapse internally. Their reliance on logic-based AI navigation systems made them especially vulnerable. When they noticed inconsistencies in their long-range transit routes, vessels arriving minutes off schedule, whole convoys miscalculating gravity wells, they believed it to be cosmic drift. By the time they discovered their systems were following a new set of calibration equations, ones no Kalari had written, it was too late. The changes had been absorbed into operational norms, auto-patched across thousands of nodes without any flags. No virus. No breach. Just rewritten assumptions. In panic, the Kalari shut down their entire quantum route network for diagnostics, triggering a logistical standstill across 6 sectors. The resulting economic and political fallout led to a complete reorganization of their High Council. But the key detail wasn't the crash, it was that Earth didn't claim credit. No threats, no messages, no show of force. Just silence. That silence became our greatest weapon. Meanwhile, the Varnax, famed for their predictive warfare, began experiencing strategic collapses during their simulations. Their war algorithms, trained over centuries, suddenly lost accuracy when modeling Earth-based responses. It wasn't that humans were outthinking them, it was that Earth refused to behave in ways the models could interpret. The Varnax began feeding outdated behavioral data into their own systems, hoping to simulate us better. Instead, they created a feedback loop of false assumptions that culminated in a catastrophic training accident, killing several of their high-level tacticians. From that moment, they ceased all direct modeling of Terran strategy. This wasn't military action in the traditional sense. This was cultural jamming on a galactic scale. Humanity wasn't just rewriting tactics, we were reshaping how conflict was even conceptualized. In a galaxy where every species sought pattern, structure, and predictability, Earth introduced chaos as a doctrine. Not random chaos, but engineered, controlled, asymmetric behavior designed to evade all known predictive structures. Alien historians called it the disruption era, quietly among themselves, because none of them dared say it publicly. To acknowledge Earth as the cause was to admit they had lost control, and pride was still stronger than truth. A dozen minor powers, all once vying for expansion, halted projects indefinitely. Terraforming colonies were left half-built. Stargate expansions were postponed. Every venture that bordered Terran-influenced sectors was labeled resource inefficient or logistically risky. The real reason? No one wanted to provoke attention. But humans weren't watching those borders. Our stealth fleet had shifted long ago. Not just across space, but across the very frameworks of galactic systems. We had embedded presence in protocols, routines, unmonitored feedback channels. Our fleet didn't need to move, the galaxy moved around us. Ironically, Earth didn't seek conquest. That was the part none of the empires could grasp. They waited for the inevitable Terran demand, for tribute, for surrender, for territory. It never came. And that lack of expectation broke them more than war ever could. You could resist a demand. You couldn't resist nothing. And still, we built. Not on captured worlds, but on Earth itself. Beneath the oceans, inside lunar craters, across the asteroid belts of our home system. We created void stations equipped with horizon cloaks, structures capable of hiding in plain sight even from gravimetric sensors. They weren't designed for invasion. They were designed to watch, listen, and disappear. A few empires tried to investigate. Probes went missing. Scout vessels lost power mid-transit and returned blank. Surveillance AI began to produce contradictory reports, images of things that didn't exist, or worse, images of Earth behaving normally when they knew it wasn't. These weren't glitches. They were tailored responses. Illusions fed to intruders so convincingly that empires began to mistrust their own systems more than us. And so they turned inward. Paranoia set in. Military leaders began interrogating their own engineers. Civil unrest grew as budget after budget was funneled into counter-stealth programs that produced no results. Governments collapsed not by invasion, but by exhaustion. They were chasing ghosts. This chaos suited us perfectly. Not out of malice, but survival. Humanity had learned, long before reaching the stars, that visibility invited destruction. So we adapted. We made invisibility our first line of defense. Not just of ships, but of intent. We didn't announce what we wanted. We never stated objectives. The galaxy saw that as indecision. But it was design. Our ships, if you could call them that, weren't vessels in the traditional sense anymore. They were modular intelligences. Shifting structures with no fixed mass or signature. Some were little more than self-aware plasma filaments riding on dark matter currents. Others could mimic cosmic dust fields, hiding entire intelligence arrays inside what looked like harmless anomalies. They didn't engage enemies. They became environment. And that terrified every species that once called us primitive. Because now, even the stars could lie. And somewhere in all of this, the last of the original Concord powers, the Arwaics, made a fatal error. They sent a diplomatic delegation to Earth. Not in aggression, but in desperation. Their message was clear. Tell us what you want. They never arrived. No wreckage was found. No debris. Not even a gravitic ripple from their exit point. Just gone. The message was received nonetheless. Because Earth responded a week later, not through words, but through action. A Rixian communication hub, once plagued by internal latency issues, suddenly stabilized. Entire sectors of their broken economy began self-correcting as automated repair systems they didn't know existed activated. It was as if Earth had reached into their failing infrastructure and healed it, not as mercy, but as a lesson. We don't destroy what we understand. And we understand you perfectly. From that moment on, Earth became more than a threat. We became legend. The thing that whispered between sensor sweeps. the flicker behind every secure connection. The question no one wanted to ask. What if they're already here? But they were asking it. Every day. In every council, war room, and senate across the stars. And Earth said nothing. Because silence was now our most effective language. Entire galactic systems had rewritten protocols to avoid provoking Earth, yet the unknown still gnawed at them. The silence wasn't just terrifying, it was maddening. Empires obsessed with order and control couldn't bear not knowing where the lines were drawn. Humanity had become the galactic equivalent of Schrödinger's threat, both present and absent, peaceful and hostile, everywhere and nowhere. That psychological weight pressed harder than any warship. The Trelzari were the first to break. Known for their hive-like unity and centralized thought control, they couldn't tolerate uncertainty. Their leadership council, which once ruled over 5 systems, fragmented into paranoia-driven factions. They poured resources into developing what they called the Absolute Eye, an omni-spectrum surveillance system meant to detect gravitational fluctuations, energy dispersions, or any trace of Terran stealth fleets. It launched with great fanfare and hope. It lasted 6 minutes. Not because it failed, but because it broadcast a single image across every open Trelzari network, their supreme chamber, empty, with the words, "We were never gone." No source. No trace. The Absolute Eye's logs were scrubbed mid-process. Half their populace interpreted it as a coup. The rest took it as divine judgment. Riots followed. Their government fell in under 2 days. The incident wasn't spoken of publicly, but whispers traveled. And every species that had mocked Earth's slow development now scrambled to avoid even the idea of being noticed. The very word human had shifted meaning. It wasn't a name anymore, it was a warning. It meant unseen consequence. It meant the game was over before you even knew you were playing. While the rest of the galaxy unraveled itself chasing shadows, Earth quietly expanded its influence. Not through territory or trade routes, but through silent integration. Key systems began operating more efficiently. Pirate activity dropped in regions where Terran influence was rumored. Communications networks self-healed in zones previously destabilized by solar flares. No one could trace these miracles, but they all bore one invisible fingerprint, patterns in subquantum fluctuations that, when studied deeply enough, matched Earth's energy signature. But even then, humanity stayed quiet. We didn't seek tribute. We didn't demand alliance. Instead, we embedded ourselves into the very mechanics of interstellar civilization. We were no longer a participant in galactic politics. We were the substrate it ran on. The more species tried to isolate themselves from Earth's influence, the more they depended on systems unknowingly derived from Terran technology. Commerce AI that operated with unheard-of efficiency? Derived from stealth fleet core processors. Medical breakthroughs in neurorepair? Adapted from Earth-based combat recovery protocols. Even the advanced linguistics interpreters used by the diplomatic corps across species? Built on algorithms sourced from an anonymous Earth server buried under 30 layers of routing deception. No one could fight us, because they couldn't even separate from us. Still, there were a few who couldn't let go of pride. The Brassian High Tribunal, an ancient and isolationist species that believed themselves untouchable, finally issued an open decree. Earth must present itself to the galactic community. Continued silence will be treated as an act of aggression. They gave us 10 solar cycles to respond. On the 11th, their central archive vanished. Not destroyed. Not corrupted. Gone. The physical data cores were still in place, untouched, pristine, but every single byte of stored knowledge had been replaced with one repeating line. If you cannot understand silence, you will never survive the truth. The Braxians tried to recover, but their societal infrastructure had been entirely dependent on archived memory. Without it, even their own language fell apart. Within a month, they disbanded. Their homeworld went dark, their ships grounded, and their stars left unguarded. And still, Earth made no announcement. The other species watched in paralyzed awe. For the first time, they weren't just afraid of what humanity could do, they feared what they might already be. That maybe we hadn't just built stealth ships, we had become stealth itself. That perhaps, the human identity was no longer confined to a species or planet, but was now a distributed consciousness woven through the framework of reality. We were the code behind the curtain, the ghost in the machine. And the galaxy finally understood. Earth wasn't playing the game. We had rewritten it. That realization crushed centuries-old hierarchies. Generals who trained their whole lives for conventional war resigned overnight. Strategic war colleges erased entire curriculums. Weapons manufacturers filed for bankruptcy as their clients stopped requesting new arms. Because what good was firepower when your enemy couldn't be targeted, reasoned with, or even confirmed to exist in physical space? The Galactic Concord, once the most powerful collective of species, dissolved in less than 3 cycles. Not through conflict, but consensus. They declared that no species had the authority or capacity to challenge Earth. Instead, they reformed under a new doctrine, the Silent Accord. Its sole purpose was to maintain stability and avoid any action that might draw further Terran interest. But we weren't interested in ruling them. That's what terrified them most. They had prepared for conquest. They had prepared for retaliation. But nothing could prepare them for irrelevance. Earth had moved on. Our focus wasn't domination, it was transcendence. Humanity's stealth fleet wasn't just a military force, it was a testing ground for post-physical intelligence. The ships were no longer crewed in any traditional sense. They were self-aware environments, constantly upgrading, evolving, and observing. Each one was a fragment of collective Terran consciousness, a node in a vast neural lattice that extended beyond known physics. These vessels didn't operate under command, they dreamed. They learned from galaxies we'd never charted, whispered in dimensions no one else could sense, and occasionally, they returned, not with weapons, but with knowledge. Knowledge that Earth quietly integrated into itself. We were no longer a civilization. We were becoming an event. And still, the galaxy waited. Not because they thought we might act, but because they couldn't imagine existing without our gaze. Like children who'd glimpsed something too large to comprehend, the empires of old now huddled in their systems, hoping to go unnoticed, fearing the consequences of curiosity. And Earth? Earth simply watched. The galaxy was no longer ruled by thrones, fleets, or alliances. It was ruled by fear, silent, suffocating, unrelenting fear. No one had heard from Earth in decades, but their absence wasn't taken as weakness. It was worshipped as a doctrine. Silence had become sacred. Every species that once jockeyed for dominance now whispered about unseen observers and ships that never decloaked. The era of shouting power into the void had ended. Now, survival depended on not being noticed. Yet even in this fragile balance, there were those who couldn't resist scratching the wound. The Vlaxoride Dominion, one of the few remaining empires with backbone, believed the galaxy's fear was a bluff. To them, Earth was a ghost story. They'd never faced a Terran vessel, never suffered a fleet disappearance, never heard the voice of a human in their networks. And so, they began expanding. Not subtly, but with brazen defiance, colonizing fringe systems, militarizing trade routes, and broadcasting their doctrine of strength as the new standard. The galaxy held its breath. The Vlaxoride built their grand declaration on the ashes of a forgotten mining colony known as Virith 9, a system once rumored to hold Terran tech. They broadcast their occupation live, daring Earth to respond. "If the humans are still out there," their supreme commander mocked, "they will come. And when they do, we will remind them what power truly is." Nothing happened for 26 days. Then, without warning, the signal feed changed. No transition. No trace. Just a cut, like reality itself skipped a beat. The broadcast resumed, but it wasn't Vlaxoride propaganda anymore. It showed the same mining colony, but now abandoned. Not destroyed. Not burning. Just emptied. Ships still hovered lifeless in orbit. Their lights flickered, engines dormant. But no one moved. Not a single life form. Not even the drones. The only sound was a low hum, just beneath perception, like something watching back. Then the image changed again. This time, it was the Vlaxerai capital, their own grand citadel. And it too was silent. No words followed. No threat. No warning. Just a timestamp. 12 hours from then. The galaxy panicked. Empires shut down long-range communication arrays. Civilizations pulled their ships into orbit, locked down planetary atmospheres, decommissioned exploration programs. For the first time in galactic history, curiosity had become a crime. The message was clear: observe nothing, question nothing, disturb nothing. If you speak Earth's name, it might hear you. When the 12 hours passed, nothing visibly happened. But the Vlaxerai capital was never heard from again. Their trade convoys stopped arriving. Their embassies went dark. No rescue missions were launched. No inquiries were made. The rest of the galaxy understood: Earth didn't retaliate. Earth redacted. This was the new warfare. No longer about lasers or fleets or firepower. Now, victory meant erasure, clean, silent, total. Not just from the battlefield but from memory, history, context. One moment you were significant, the next, you'd never existed. The threat of death had been replaced by the threat of forgetting. To cross Earth wasn't to risk destruction. It was to risk irrelevance. From then on, new species emerging into space were quietly educated not by councils, but by silent protocol. Probes embedded with preloaded languages and fragments of history explained the unspoken law. There was a boundary, and beyond that boundary lived the silence. You did not test it. You did not seek it. You let it be. Entire academic fields vanished. Xenological psychology, Terran sociology, predictive warfare models, all deemed obsolete. Instead, scholars studied absence, mapping patterns and disappearances, theorizing motives that could never be confirmed. The greatest scientific minds debated whether Earth had evolved beyond physical matter entirely or simply chosen to remain unseen forever. The old joke had returned. If a human moves and no one sees it, did it happen? But now it wasn't a punchline, it was a genuine philosophical dilemma. The terrifying answer was yes. And you'd never know until it was too late. Back on Earth, or whatever Earth had become, there were no celebrations. No triumphant messages. Humanity had long transcended the need for validation. What remained was quiet observation, continual evolution, and a simple unspoken goal: stability. Because deep in the silence, Earth had realized something no other species had. The galaxy was broken. Not in war. Not in chaos. But in belief. The endless race for control, territory, pride, it always ended the same way. Destruction. Collapse. Rebirth. And back again. A loop fueled by ego and fear. Earth had broken that cycle, not by winning, but by becoming the variable no one could calculate. The unknowable. The invisible. They had turned fear into peace. Because when every empire feared provoking the same entity, conflict stopped. Not for virtue, but for survival. That, in the end, was the greatest paradox. Fear had become the galaxy's only source of order. And Earth had become its silent guardian. Not because it had to, but because no one else could. The galactic map had changed, not with borders or war zones, but with voids. Entire sectors were now marked not with names, but with absences. Systems where trade once flowed now sat untouched, avoided by every species with a shred of instinct. The official designation was Zone Null, but everyone knew what it meant. Earth had passed through. Not as conquerors. Not as diplomats. But as a force. A presence. A boundary between what was and what would never be again. In the aftermath of the Vlaxerai disappearance, something shifted across the stars. Empires that once flaunted power now whispered alliances. Rivalries paused indefinitely. Disputes over territory were quietly dropped. Even pirates and warlords changed their tactics. The galaxy, for the first time, embraced caution, not out of reason, but out of fear of awakening the silence again. It wasn't about surviving a battle anymore. It was about never being noticed. Some species tried to make sense of it. The Egrith Collective launched a secret initiative, Project Witness, aimed at understanding Earth's silence. They sent autonomous probes laced with quantum relays, cloaked beneath neutrino masking fields. None returned. Not a single signal. The project was erased before the collective leadership even admitted it had existed. Denial became self-preservation. Others adopted rituals of avoidance, removing Earth's name from records, purging human images from archives, even teaching children that humanity had been a myth, a tale to keep explorers from drifting too far. But myths, when left alone, grow stronger. And humanity knew this. Their silence wasn't just a tactic. It was a message carved into the foundation of galactic awareness. Earth no longer needed to speak to be obeyed. Their silence was a roar heard across dimensions. Every ship that blinked out of existence without warning only deepened the legend. Every colony that vanished without trace became another verse in the silent song of humanity's shadow. And still, humanity watched. They had seeded systems with observation arrays invisible to even the most advanced sensor networks. They had weaponized gravitational folds, embedded them in the void between stars, creating kill zones no vessel would ever detect before it was already lost. They had rewritten warfare to exclude the very concept of confrontation. There would be no warnings, no countdowns, no declarations of war. Only a shift. A pause. A moment where something was, and then wasn't. There were some who still wanted answers. A few brave or foolish species attempted contact, not with hostility, but reverence. A slow-growing sect known as the Obscured Path built temples at the edge of null zones, praying not to gods but to observers. They left offerings, data slates, histories, biological samples, pleading for guidance, mercy, relevance. One such temple on the edge of Sector Kira 12 was observed for 139 days. Then, one morning, it too had vanished. No debris. No signal. Just silence. The message, once again, was clear. Earth had no need for worship. Only understanding. That understanding became the core doctrine of the emerging galactic paradigm. Civilization itself had changed. Instead of expansion, species turned inward. Instead of claiming stars, they cultivated stability. Ambition was no longer rewarded, restraint was. The chaos that had once driven progress was now replaced with a cold equilibrium, built not on diplomacy, but dread. The price of stepping out of line wasn't war. It was being forgotten. And yet, behind this galactic shift, one question endured: why? Why had humanity chosen this path? Some believed they had ascended, that they now existed in a higher dimensional framework, and their actions were only partially visible in our space. Others thought Earth had grown tired of building, fighting, dying. That it had looked upon the endless cycle of empire and chosen a role no one else dared to play, the hand that erased the sword. The ultimate deterrent. But perhaps the truth was simpler. Perhaps humanity had seen something no one else could. Perhaps in their silence, they had finally grasped what true power was: not control, but absence. Not presence, but restraint. In a galaxy obsessed with domination, Earth had become the only species that needed nothing. And that, above all, made them unstoppable. The final record ever uncovered from humanity's pre-silence era was a transmission buried in a derelict data buoy near the edge of the Endron spiral. It contained no coordinates, no names, no threats. Just a simple line spoken in an old Terran dialect. We didn't vanish. We just stopped explaining ourselves. That message became doctrine. And with that, Earth was no longer part of the galaxy. They were beneath it. Beyond it. Surrounding it. Watching. Waiting. Not as a tyrant. Not even as a god. But as the quiet reminder that sometimes, the most dangerous voice in the universe is the one that doesn't speak at all.